Hey guys, what is up, and welcome back to another video. And no, the title is not a lie, because it is finally time for me to talk about the Amazing Spider-Man once again. And to those of you asking, Rift, why aren't you making a video about the Amazing Spider-Man 2? You already did a video about the Amazing Spider-Man 1. The answer to that is, shut up. But to be honest, I've wanted to revisit this film for a while. Not because I dislike my original video, but instead because I feel like I missed out a lot of things, and also because I feel like the climate in the Spider-Man fandom as a whole right now is massively different to what it was back then. When I wrote that video 5 years ago, oh my god, I'm getting old, the popular opinion surrounding The Amazing Spider-Man was that it was a bad adaptation.
Hell no.
On the one hand, you had these Sam Raimi elitists who were unwilling to let the original Spider-Man movie trilogy go, and on the other hand, you had this new wave of Spider-Man fans who had got into the films purely through the MCU via Tom Holland's films, and both of them were very highly opinionated and seemed to focus a lot of their hatred towards the Amazing Spider-Man. And my video really represents this. I made it during a time where there was a lot of video essays dunking on The Amazing Spider-Man, when the general audience was swayed in the direction of hating on those two films. As a result, my original video is combative, it's argumentative, and it's a bit cocky. But that's not because I hated the other Spider-Man films or the other arguments for why those films worked. It was purely because at that time, as an Amazing Spider-Man fan, I had to be defensive to get my point across. But then, some time passes, I failed to make a review of the sequel, and what do you know, Marvel brings back Andrew Garfield, and he stars alongside Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland. And almost immediately, the most obvious thing happens. The general audience revisits Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man films, and they realise, oh my god, these were great the entire time! And revisionism happens, where everyone acts like they never hated them, and joy enters the world, and everyone's hypocritical, and everyone lies, and everyone denies that they hated on him the entire time. All of you people who did that are forever on my enemy list, by the way. So, I figured, what better way to capitalise on this new era of love for the Amazing Spider-Man than making another video where I spread the love even more, address everything I missed in the first video, and further explain why I still love the Amazing Spider-Man. To begin, I want to clear the air. In my original video, I said this. But once again, with hindsight, I can look back and quite easily say that Mark Webb was the perfect man for the job at the time. And it's because of both of the films in this franchise that he's not just my favourite Spider-Man director, but my favourite director. And all these years later, I just want to say that no, Mark Webb is not my all-time favourite director, because I've since matured and evolved into a pretentious film bro who only watches the work of such auteurs as Neil Breen and Michael Bay.
I am directly below.
But seriously, that is one of the few points that makes me kind of cringe whenever I rewatch my original video. Yeah, he might have directed my all-time favourite film, and he might have directed films that I absolutely adore, but I gotta be honest, I kind of presented him as some flawless director who could do no wrong, and since then, he's sold out and directed Snow White, so, But no, in all seriousness, it's because since then I've learned a lot more about film. My tastes have changed, and yes, Mark Webb is still a massive influence and inspiration to me, but he's not my all-time favourite director. Just wanted to clarify that. I can't lie, Kurosawa is kind of God. But the only reason I'm saying that is because this is about repurposing the old video, readdressing it, pushing it forward. And I may as well get the only thing I've changed my mind on out of the way now. So how about the rest of that film, huh? I think the easiest way to approach it is to just go through this list of notes that I've made, starting with the most obvious stuff that I missed in the last video, and eventually ending with some of the more long-winded and a bit more heavy observations I've made on recent rewatches. And I think to begin, the easiest place to start is with the soundtrack.
I was really excited about creating a very specific, very simple theme that you could play with one hand on a keyboard. And James, we walked into his studio one day and he came up and he's like, I got something for you. And there was that there it was. Dun, 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 dun.
mainly because, for obvious reasons, I can't actually show any of it, lest the copyright gods come and smite me, but it is probably the most egregious thing that I missed in my original video. Look, I'm just going to come right out and say it. I think it may be James Horner's masterpiece, and I mean it when I say that, because he did Wrath of Khan. Man, we're talking about the guy that composed Battle in the Mutara Nebula. I mean, damn when I say this soundtrack is good. I'll be honest, I've always had a bit more of a preference for the second film, but after my rewatch, it's just too good here that I don't think I can pick between the two anymore. And since I can't play them, please, I urge you, just pause the video, go and listen to the main theme, obviously, the Ganali device, Rooftop Kiss, the bridge, Saving New York. They're all some of my favourite tracks from this film, and to be honest, some of my favourite tracks from a superhero film, hell, maybe even a film in general, and I do not understate that. Look, I'm not going to act like I'm some master musician or someone that can really comment on why music works or anything, but hopefully if you just pause, go listen to those tracks and come back, maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you won't. But anyway, I just had to talk about the soundtrack. So where do I take it from there? I think the easiest way is to go right back to basics. A lot of my original video was focused around Peter and why I believed he was a really good adaptation of the character. But in doing so, all I ever really talked about was his character's motivations, his search for a father figure, and why I thought that was compelling. I never really talked about why I really liked his adaptation, or why it really worked for me as opposed to a lot of other people. And if I did it in a very minor way. So here we are, 5 years later, and have my opinions on Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker changed at all? No, not even slightly. In fact, they've gotten even better. To be honest, I can't believe I never talked about the skateboarding thing last time. It was such a point of contention at the time that film came out. How can this nerdy character who's supposed to be all geeky and left out of society and blah 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 have a skateboard? That's too cool for Peter Parker. He shouldn't have that. And to that I have to say I'm flattered, because I grew up at the absolute bottom of the social hierarchy and I had a skateboard. So thanks for telling me that I was cool all along, broskies. But for real, I don't think it can be stated just how much a tiny, pathetic, inconsequential thing like a damn skateboard impacted so many people's perception of the film. But here I am to tell you that it isn't inconsequential, it never was, and it actually benefits the film so much and uplifts it to a brilliant degree that I love it even more now. It isn't just a non-consequential prop in the film, it is the basis for Spider-Man's entire moveset, for Peter's entire physical ability when he first gets his powers. I love how he learns to web swing while just jumping around on his skateboard, how he's able to use his powers to reach new heights with the tricks that he's able to perform. It's inspired, it adds a depth to Peter's character and to Spider-Man's moveset that I think hasn't really been shown anywhere else. In the comics or in other films or even other TV shows, he just kind of jumps out the way of a car or just kind of walks up to a wall and starts climbing, only to get all of his moves and his powers and his skill set in the next scene. Here, he has a reason to have all of that early, and we see him study and practice it before he even goes so far as to go after Uncle Ben's killer. I like how, unlike in the comics, the showmanship and the craft is personal and a bit more unique to him, as opposed to him going on TV and doing all these wondrous, weird and wacky things that lead to the death of Uncle Ben. It's not that he's overconfident, it's that he's distracted by what he loves and he learns from what he loves, and he achieves everything in the film because of what he loves. And when it all comes back to bite him because he was too distracted, the outcome is the worst thing imaginable. There's so many nuggets like that to Peter's character in this film to enjoy. So many tiny layers of depth that make him even more compelling than any other interpretation of the character we've had before or after, in my opinion, of course. I love how he's not just presented as this book-smart lab geek. In fact, we see him walking behind people who are clearly far nerdier than he is, showing that he's not actually at the bottom of the social hierarchy, but instead just an outcast, a loner, someone that's probably a bit awkward, someone that's probably got their own issues, that doesn't know how to interact with the wider social circles in his school. I like how he's shown as being a bit more practically smart when the basement floods and he goes down to help Uncle Ben, and he's the one who knows how to fix everything. Helps to make it a bit more believable when he goes to build his own web shooters and put this expensive, crazy costume together. I like how he has that crass attitude that Peter has in the early comics, how he's willing to go out of his way to get beaten up to defend someone when they're getting bullied themselves. So yeah, all in all, I still love Peter's character here, and I actually think it's more inspiring and more relatable as I've gotten older. There's other little details from all the other characters' lives that I really love in this film as well that helps build it out and make it a bit more believable. Whether it's Ben hating May's meatloaf.
How many meatballs have I made for you?
The fact that Uncle Ben and Aunt May both have jobs that kind of keep them preoccupied as well, rather than them both just being stay-at-home old people like the other adaptations imply. Except for Tom Holland's trilogy, oddly enough. To be fair, I think a lot of these nuggets for me just come from how it builds. Peter's relationship with Uncle Ben and Aunt May, you know, meatloaf, bowling trophies. But yeah, it's all really good stuff, and all those little moments of just niche, offhanded dialogue really help me care for and love these characters even more. I've obviously got a lot more to talk about the narrative and the characters that I kind of want to wrap this up with, but before I do that, I'm going to speedrun a lot of the inconsequential notes I took that I think are really interesting and really cool that I also like, that didn't make the cut in the first video. Ready? Crane Dad, Crane Dad, Crane Dad, Crane Dad. I love you, Crane Dad. You are a gem, a national treasure. Please return in Avengers Doomsday. Captain Stacy. In my original video I explained how his actions in the dinner scene were really important to Peter figuring out the whole thing about responsibility, but I failed to tie him to the whole narrative of Peter looking for a father figure. He almost symbolises the father that Peter always wanted, the father that's there for him no matter what, even when he's at his lowest, even when he realises that everything he's doing is against everything he believes in. He shows up with a shotgun, defends him, and takes a bullet for him, but in this case the bullet is a giant lizard claw that stabs him in the chest, and it deeply affects Peter in the end. It's great. Moving on, I don't want this video to be 7 hours long. I love how Oscorp is a lot more dark and mysterious in this film, a shady, shadowy organisation whose motives aren't clear and stand in a stark comparison to the one in the Raimi films that just makes supervillain looking supervillain gear for supervillains. The sets! Oh my god, I love the sets! Just look how cool these sets are! Look at this! And this! And this! And this! The sets are all just magnificent. They're all so well designed, they all look so cool, and I love the interior of Oscorp Tower, and I love how the school looks, and I love how the Parker house looks. I just love it. Eggs, eggs, eggs. My housemates must think I'm mad. Its representation of Spider-Sense is just so cool. I love how it's all like flashy and weird and crazy and chaotic, and that train scene is so cool as a result. Peter's suit being inspired by wrestling is just so primal and just so brilliant. It's almost like it's harkening back to the early days of superheroes where Superman was inspired by strongman, and it directly ties Spider-Man back to the origins of comic books and the origins of the universe and the origins of creativity itself. Speaking of Spider-Man's costume, we've got to talk about the fashion, because the fashion is so cool in this. The fashion is so over the moon in this film. Everyone's costumes are so good. Everyone's serving, everyone's eating, and nobody's leaving any crumbs. Those boots in that lab, Gwen. Stop. And breathe. Everything's cool, everything's calm, and we're ready to round this out with a nice, straightforward evaluation of the film. You should know by now that I love character. Characters are like my favourite thing to work with when I'm writing, when I'm watching a film, when I'm watching a TV show, when I'm reading a book. All I'm ever thinking about is, why is this character doing what he's doing? What's going on in this character's head? How does this character feel? What does this character sound like? What does this character love in his spare time? Does he like sandwiches? Does he like baguettes? I don't know. I love character, man. And I made that clear in my original video where I was like, Mark Webb loves characters, and Mark Webb is the reason that I love characters, and he inspired me to make my characters more amazing and whatever. So I wanted to round this out by just pointing out how much Mark Webb loves characters and how well this film establishes its characters. I want you to take a guess. Maybe you haven't seen the film in a long time, maybe you have a warped perception of it, but I want you to take a guess nonetheless. How long does it take for Peter to say the name Spider-Man? Have you got it? Do you know the answer? Because I do. That's right. It takes 1 hour and 20 minutes for the end of the bridge scene to happen. 1 hour and 20 minutes for Peter to save that kid, to perch on that railing and say, I'm Spider-Man. But it goes further than that. How long does it take for him to put on a costume? Not the main Spider-Man suit, just the vigilante costume. 50 minutes. Yeah, that's right, and it takes Uncle Ben 45 minutes to die as well. But to be honest, Uncle Ben dies around about the same time in Spider-Man 2002 as well. But it's not necessarily about when they die, it's about how the film spends its time before that death. I'm not here to compare them, but in The Amazing Spider-Man, Mark spends so much time just building characters, just exploring characters, building this foundation of mystery and intrigue and anxiety and love, not just between Peter and Ben, but Peter and Gwen, and all the tension that comes with that and all the weirdness that comes with that. Going back to little nuggets of information that I was talking about, the fact that Aunt May sleeps on the sofa because she just can't go to bed, probably because after Ben's death she's too scared to sleep alone. Mark did not have to include that scene. He did not have to include Peter coming home and putting a blanket over her, you know? But he did it anyway instead of rushing us towards that next big action set piece on the bridge. I guess what I'm trying to say is that before we've even seen the Lizard, before we've even seen Spider-Man being Spider-Man, we've had what, like one chase scene, one scene of him in the suit, and Uncle Ben's death. The rest is just Mark doing what he does best. Building characters. So yeah, I think I've said all I needed to say. It's been a little chaotic, I admit, but I needed to say it nonetheless. I'm still trying to experiment with these new unscripted videos that I've been doing recently, and this, I've got to say, has been the most hectic one so far. Anyway, I hope you liked this revisit to the world of The Amazing Spider-Man, and if you wanted to hear me talk about it even more, my original video is always there. You can probably find a link to that down below, or I'll tag it to the end of this one. But yeah, if you liked what I had to say, or you enjoyed what you saw, feel free to leave a like or a comment down below. It means a lot to me, and I'd love to hear what you think of The Amazing Spider-Man as well. Also, if you never want to miss a video, feel free to hit that subscribe button and also that bell icon. That would mean even more to me. And if you really want to help me out, feel free to follow the link in the description to my debut novel, Resurgence of Gaia. It would mean the world to me. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys, and as always, I will see you on the next video. Eggs, meatloaf, bowling trophy.